Fall camp is over, which means it's time to take stock of where the team is. And we have one of the best in the business to tell us exactly where the team stands, what questions are answered, and what more questions exist. But before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by Kalshi. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKED ON to get $10 when you trade $10. But Brad, a lot of questions. I think a lot of people were upset with Camp T and how anemic the offense kind of felt when we were actually getting to the end zone. But today, Kenny said that he's very happy with where the offense stands. Do we believe him here?
Yes and no. There's obviously a lot of room to grow, and yeah, anybody who got up to Camp T saw kind of the culmination of what we've been seeing each and every day in these fall camp practices is the defense is ahead of the offense. Typically in camps, defense will be ahead, but by this point, you usually we're seeing some good back and forth, and any camp you kind of always have that thing like, well, is this cause for concern for the offense, or is maybe our defense really really good? I think here it's a little from column A, a little from column B. I think ASU's defense is in prime position to be a very strong unit for Brian Ward. Yet again, I've been extremely impressed by especially the kind of the linebackers in the secondary, but even in the last maybe a week or so, really starting to get some of my pre-camp questions about the D line answered in a positive way, feeling really good about the edges, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing Clayton Smith move, get another cup of coffee with the offense is they're starting to feel really good about those edges. Flip side though, on the concern, some of the questions raised, I felt pretty good about the offensive line heading into camp. Right now, I don't know that I'm worried, but I'm concerned.
Yeah.
There's some guys getting some dinged up a little bit. They made a change a few days ago. I believe this is the third day in a row that Luke Paklenko has taken the first team left tackle reps. Locking down that blind side for the QBs. I talked to him today a little bit after practice, and he says that he feels comfortable over there. That's not too much for him to make that switch from right to left. However, that is pretty notable that, we're this far along camp. We had seen the same starting unit basically for the first 2 weeks. And now these last 3 days coming off of Camp T, we're seeing a little bit of change there. So, and of course, the tight ends, got ripped by Kenny yesterday and deservedly so. A little bit of bounce back today, although it was a non padded practice. So take that for what it is worth. But that group's really missing Khamari Anderson. Just is the terms of that leader. We've seen flashes from guys like principally like AJ Ia, but just the consistency at this point still not there. I mean, granted, he's still heading into his second college season. So as I talked to Jason Mon today, he said that there's growth, but there's going to be these times where there's going to be setbacks. So he has some questions that are maybe some new questions on that offensive side, but on the flip side, in a positive way, I'm getting a lot of my pre-camp concerns on the defense answered because that looks to be a pretty formidable unit.
Yeah. And talking about going back to the offense here, because I think we're all pretty happy. I mean, I know Brian Ward said he's like, oh, the offense is giving us more looks and we're not happy. I mean, that's coach speak. The defense, I got to assume, because the defense looks really good. But I saw in the practice report yesterday that on top of the tight ends not looking very good, it did seem like we were starting to see at least Cutter Boley start to air it out a little bit more, look for a couple more deep passes, and they weren't really landing. So, what's your level of comfort there with kind of as we start to? I mean, I think we're pretty confident that Boley is going to be QB1 at this point. What's your level of comfort with him as we start to, I guess, expand this playbook in practice?
I mean, first, that's kind of that first thing. It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be Cutter coming off of Camp T. He's taken every single rep with the ones these last 3 days in the practices. So I mean, obviously, it's just a matter of when, not if. And yeah, you did mention he's been taking more deep shots. That was one of the things he didn't do at the in the Camp T
Hmm.
scrimmage. Very efficient. If you're looking for one of those guys who really prizes completion percentage, he's right there. Yards per attempt, and those more advanced metrics. Pushing the ball downfield not so much. And that, I mean, granted, that's just been something that overall the Sun Devil offense, back to that first spring practice, it's been really kind of a lot of quick game. But I will say we have seen more deep shots from Cutter. Perhaps got a little bit message received. After the scrimmage, and he has some really good deep throws today in practice. There was
Okay.
one to Reed Harris that really who returned to practice after missing a couple sessions. He looked really good. He had a good throw on the run to Raiden Vines Bright in the 2 minute drill near the end of today's practice. So it's encouraging. The arm talent and arm strength is there. maybe got him a little bit of trouble in spring practice, which is, maybe got in the downfield into double coverage or something. But I feel he's been more judicious with the ball. Kenny talked about a little bit earlier this week and talked about the quarterbacks really have only had like 3 Jeopardy balls in 11 on 11 sessions throughout camp. And we've seen better ball security, better decisions. That doesn't necessarily mean that there hasn't been mistakes, but the trend line is in an encouraging direction. And I do think that, we're seeing some more shots downfield. And I don't think that is really going to become a core component of this Sun Devil passing attack. I still think you're going to see primarily a lot of quick game, especially maybe if these concerns with the offensive line persist. I think this is a coaching staff that can adjust and even maybe lean into that further. But I do think that we've seen some progress there. And, I guess back to the original question, my comfort level, I feel cautiously optimistic. Maybe more so like the weapons are so good.
Hmm.
And so just the quarterback, you're not necessarily have to ask him to, air it out 50 times and push the ball consistently downfield. There's I think some pretty good offensive minds in that room that are working to, with some of those very talented chess pieces in the playmaker department.
Gotcha. Because and I know we don't have a ton of time with you today, so I'm gonna ask I'm gonna ask for one player on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball that, from everything you've seen in fall practice, now that that camp is over, that Sun Devil fans should be circling as the. I mean, okay, we have Cutter Boley and he doesn't count, but the breakout guy that maybe the casual fan is not expecting that's going to make big moves this year.
Let's start on defense. Josiah
Hmm.
McGrew, ball
Okay.
hawk.
Oh
Dude has
yeah.
been wildly impressive. He was like the personal nemesis of Cutter Boley in spring. I think he
Yeah.
picked him off 3 times. I think he's got him like once or twice here in fall camp. But the dude is long. He has a nose for the ball. He's just always around. He's made a bunch of picks. He's also what's really kind of really impressed me is like he's not afraid to come up and with those run fits and just like get his nose dirty. And he's laid some big time hits. And I think it's a situation where you wonder if he's now like in that starting consideration. We've seen him take first team reps, and perhaps he is at free. You got Lyrik at strong, and then Montana's your nickel, and then Boogie perhaps becomes that versatile chess piece that you got that a defensive coordinator Brian Ward can move around a little bit. So I've been really highly encouraged by what I've seen from Josiah McGrew. Coming over from FIU. Didn't set the world on fire. It wasn't like an Omarion Miller or a Reed Harris level transfer portal acquisition, but I think in terms of impact, it could be very very significant for the Sun Devil defense. All right, so on the offensive side of the ball, let's see. I think right now you probably some of the receivers I've made outside of the kind of that the Miller Reed Harris tier. Actually, you know what? Jaren Hamilton is a guy that was
Hmm.
in the coach's doghouse, the fans' doghouse, all last year. And he had that big tech game, but there's so many missed opportunities there. I believe they had that one like would have been an 86 yard or just could walk in touchdown. Just fell. I don't think I've seen him drop a pass this spring or fall camp. He has been really just like a whole new guy. And I talked to him up Camp T about what has literally led to this growth, and he was pretty candid. He talked about how just it took him some like some time to just like really kind of be introspective and reflect upon how he's approaching the game, how he's approaching being coached hard by a guy like Hines Ward, and it's paid off. I mean, I felt pretty good. Like this receiver room would be good and maybe a little top heavy in terms of those aces up there, but from what we've seen from Jalen Moss, Jaren Hamilton, Raiden Vinesbright, and Uriah Nelms and Corey Butler, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about them. They've been absolutely fantastic, especially in recent practices when Miller and Harris have been getting some time off. This is all of a sudden a room that is maybe like you feel good about the for 2 or 3 guys. Maybe you're feeling like good about the 5, 6 guys deep. And so I think Jaren Hamilton could be a guy that could be a good redemption story. Now, he did have a good fall camp last year, and then turned out, a not so great regular season. But something about him and his play and his attitude and his approach seems a little bit different this year. And obviously, that speed that earned him his Turbo nickname. That could be something that maybe that does help open up the passing game a little bit more downfield.
And speaking of fast guys, I've got Corey Butler on my special teams return guy list as someone I think that, if he gets the opportunity, is going to have a great impact. Again, we're going to have to see what happens. He's been on special, from what I've seen, like special teams sometimes, not on others.
Yeah, he's been on that rotation. Jalen
Hmm.
Moss looks like he's going to be that first step on the punt return. I think he's had a couple of house calls from his time at Fresno State. He's looked good, and then yeah, I think you might see Butler or Jaren Hamilton
Hmm.
in that kick return mix.
That's going to be fun. That is for certain. But as Brad alluded to, there's a lot of chaos on the offense. Today, it does sound like the offense responded. The kick did work. Before the season ever kicks off, everyone's making predictions, right? Like, who's going to win the entire thing? Who's going to win the division? Who makes the playoffs? Who makes the college football playoffs? Who's going to lift the trophy? And on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions on a live market. Will Arizona State win the Big 12 this year? Well, right now, according to Kalshi, they've got about a 4% chance, which means if you put $100 in and we end up winning the entire thing, you're going to make $2,300, $2,342.50 if we end up winning. And on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and buy out of your position. You can trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade $10. KALSHI, Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Okay, so the biggest news yesterday was Clayton Smith moving over to the tight ends because the tight ends were just, we're not going to mince words here. The tight ends were bad. Today, they have gone back. They have responded. And I want to know what you think about where the offense is sitting right now, because there are a lot of questions despite what Kenny Dillingham may see. Let us know in the comments, like the video, hit the subscription button, do all of those wonderful things. Really, it helps us keep our jobs and keep working on, in the words of Drake Toll. But yeah, Parker, coaches don't care if someone they don't want you to make a mistake, but at the end of the day, that's what practice is for. They care and they get mad when the effort is not there. And that is what happened yesterday.
And really, that's what has been that's something that coaches keep an eye on. And Kenny Dillingham, the most recent practice, he said he likes where his talent's at. He likes that his guys are putting in the work, and he said they give effort. But the bigger question that I'm trying to read between the lines in here is, are they giving consistent effort? Because I more so am thinking that's what's going on, just because the offense, they have great practices every now and then. They just have those practices where we recap and we're like, okay, the offense was really shining today. Khamari Miller, great practice. The offensive line was dominating. The quarterbacks were looking efficient. But it's not as consistent. And really, that's where I think it's coming in. They're giving effort, and the effort is really great. And it's really a positive sign to see that they're giving effort against a star-studded defense. Like, we're seeing that this defense is really shaping up to be one of the highlight defenses in the Big 12. But overall, I think the more concerning factor that we're definitely not going to hear a coach say is whether or not the offense is giving a consistent effort every single practice.
Well, Jason Moans did that, right? He's a tight ends coach at ASU, one of our best recruiters. Odds out, questions still out there on how good he is as an actual coach and able to develop these guys, because we're maybe not seeing the progression from Ia just yet in his second year. But anyways, great recruiter. And he said, I going into Tuesday's practice, I knew that it was not going to be a good one for the tight ends. It was already looking bad on Monday towards the tail end of practice. The effort wasn't really there. And then it snowballed. The good news is that Jalen Klemm called a meeting at the end of practice, just for the players only meeting with just the offense. And I got to assume that was an attempt to go in and smack some heads together and say, hey guys, look, you heard it from the coaches. This is not going to cut it. Now you're going to hear it from me. This is not going to cut it. We want to be an elite offense. Let's get our heads in the game. And from everything I'm seeing in the post-practice reports, at least today, that was true. They were spiking the ball rapidly. They were moving them with intention. At least for one day, Kenny Dillingham and putting a boot in the tight ends seems to have in some ways gotten the result they're looking for.
Yeah, an increase in intensity is the main thing I was seeing. Is that the offense, not only were they playing a lot cleaner, and they were playing really with solid pace from the reports I was seeing and hearing, but they just brought more intensity that we've seen. They brought more effort. They finally kicked it into 11, like a lot of people were hoping that they would do. And that's responsible from Jalen, Klemm, and Khamari Anderson. Klemm, as you said, directed the meeting, but those are two members of the Leadership Council. Kyson Brown, another member. Those are the three offensive members of the Pat Tillman Leadership Council. And so I imagine that all three of them played a big part, even though Klemm was the biggest part. But really, all this trickles down to the offense has to set a tone. And we talked about how the defense, they've done a really solid job. And you can always expect the defense to really lead the way early in these season camps. Typically, that's what you see. I mean, that's what I'm hearing around when it goes to other camps around the country, is that the defenses are leading the way. Just because offenses, you can, when it comes to college football, defenses, the first 3 weeks of the season, it's always adjust. You can scout a little bit, but it's so murky. The defenses are always going to start off hot, at least camp-wise, because they can adjust. But the offenses, those are the parts where you have to build chemistry and you have to get things going.
I hear you, Parker, and yes, in terms of results, sure, the defense is probably going to lead. Now, at this stage, as Brad was saying in the last segment, you expect them to be going back and forth. Great plays by the defense, dimes by the quarterback, or whatever, gashing runs by the running backs. And we did see some of those today in a practice with no pads. So how much of that was offense responding? How much of that was less adversity? We're going to find out in future practices. But Parker, there's a difference between results being led by the defense and effort being led by the defense. I'm fully with you that the defense is probably going to go and they're going to have more PBUs at the start of fall and sure. But I'm not with you on this idea that they're going to go and work harder than the offense until the offense gets their head in gear. I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous statement, all things considered. The offense, and this was a bit of a question as well in the spring, kind of looking back on it. Kenny was talking about how he wanted a team that was violent, that played with intention. And we didn't know who he was talking about at the time, but it makes you wonder how much of this was directed. Remember the David Avid comments? Directed specifically at an offensive group that maybe was not even then showing the same level of intensity that we would want to see.
And overall, like, I do agree that you have to have intensity on both sides of the ball, but if I had to have it lean a certain way, Phil, I would lean the defensive side of the ball, especially to start the season, and especially against the teams Arizona State's going to play. I mean, you're sure you have Morgan State as the opener, but Texas A&M, Kansas, Baylor, Hawaii, that first stretch of the season, I want the defense to lead the way. Sure, the offense, you have a lot of question marks and you need some answers, but if I had to pick the pendulum to go a certain way, I would lean the defense just because, A, you have more veterans on that side of the ball, B, pass rush has been a big concern, but it's looking like with a couple practices under fall camp's belt, it's looking like the pass rush is under good control, and to tie it all back, that's why Kenny Dillingham feels like he's in a good position where he can afford to have Clayton Smith play both sides of the ball, seeing him flip from defensive into the tight end room. And overall, that's why it's so comfortable right now where the defense is at. Sure, can they be better? But they're in a comfortable spot, and the offense just needs to pick it up.
And it's pretty funny, by the way. In the special episode we put out yesterday about the whole Clayton Smith thing, I think you said something to the effect of, you wanted to see the clip of someone saying, oh, look, it's not all that bad. And then you turn to the coach and you say, no, it is that difficult. And we got that, by the way, today. And there was Brad Denny did a 10-minute interview with Jason Moans that he put on his Twitter. And he was like, yeah, the tight end is probably the most difficult position to pick up on the offense, short of the quarterback. Part of that's his job. He thinks he thinks he's got the best job, right? He's got the most interesting job. But we did get that one going forward. It's going to be interesting to see what we're going to be able to do before Khamari Anderson comes back, because I think it is very clear at this point, not just from a performance results perspective, but from an effort perspective, from every side of this, the offense needs, the tight end room needs Khamari Anderson. He's the projected starter. He can't lead by example right now because he's injured. He's missing fractions of practice to go do his recovery work. The tight end room needs Khamari Anderson, and hopefully that is going to solve some of the problems. But for now, they've responded. They're looking a lot better. And today, Cutter Boley's making some deep shots. Apparently turned out really nicely. The only hope now, though, is that next week and last practices for this week, of course, there's no practices today when you're watching this, if you're watching it when it releases. But going forward, we're going to maintain that intensity, and we're going to look back in a couple weeks on this move, this public chewing out from Kenny Dillingham as kind of the tipping point for where this team starts to come together and the offense starts to perform as well as the defense has. That's the goal. But to do that, and for this team to come together as a team, You need leaders on both sides of the ball. We've talked about some of these leaders in the last segment about how Jalen Klemm pulled an all-team meeting yesterday, brought everyone, or all offense, brought them all together and cracked some skulls together. But Parker, both sides of the ball here, at this point in the preseason, we're really starting to see some guys, like Rawls is another one, really start to lead, as the Romans would, like by deeds and words, both in how they're playing and how hard they're working, and also with what they're doing and how they're verbally and it's like by presence leading the team.
And really, what I've been shocked about, Phil, I thought when it was going into this season that this Pat Tillman Leadership Council, I thought it was going to be all veterans.
Mhm.
I thought with all the guys that were leaving, I was like, there's no way that newcomers, that they're just able to get this with the way that the culture is at Arizona State. I thought there was no way that there would be an overwhelming amount of newcomers into this Pat Tillman Leadership Council. And I say overwhelming amount, but Lyrik Rawls, he's just been an overwhelming force in the Leadership Council. I mean, he has been a vocal member of the defensive side of the ball. And just hearing the way that Brian Ward, the defensive coordinator, and Coach Kenny Dillingham have been talking about Rawls' impact, they just talk that he's just a student of the game and is just for being one of the newer guys on the team has just really been contagious, both in the secondary and the defense as a whole, as getting his guys on the right level, the right headspace, and continuing to push them at practice.
And it's not just at practice. Brian Carrington, in his post-practice report today, was asked about Lyrik and what it means to him and what it means to be part of the program. And he was like, yeah, we had campfires at Camp Tonatona. And at some point, someone asked Lyrik about, what football means to him. And he's like, yeah, for my family, I'm Christmas, I'm birthdays, I'm a prom suit. I am all of these things because I am the money earner functionally. I am the guy that my family looks to me for everything because of where I come from. And I think that's some context that certainly the younger guys don't always have, right? You come in, it's your first NIL deal. Certainly some of them do. Like, don't get me wrong. But not everyone comes from that background. And to just be so open with that and to just have that part of the conversation, there's a reason why the defense has not missed a step. All right, it is Ashton Stamps, it's Lyrik Rawls, it's the rest it's Montana Warren, it's two safeties on the Leadership Council, so that position group in particular. It's these guys that are doing a really good job, not only of saying, hey, yeah, this is how you practice, this is the time you put in the weight room, but what it means, like what the next step is going to be, where you can look to go for this, as Brian was saying, as Coach Carrington was saying, this is somewhere where you can be somebody, you can make a name for yourself, you can be a name that kind of that echoes through history almost within Sun Devil football. Don't squander that opportunity. Make sure you put in every single day to make this happen. And again, there's a reason why this defense has been so consistent. I think that is a big part of it.
And a part of it that I really liked about what Brian Ward was saying, especially after this pass practice, was, and this is a key word for the defense, is selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
It is so easy on the defensive side of the ball, Phil, because there are so many egos in the defensive room. I know wide receiver rooms, you always hear divas, but mainly on the defensive side of the ball, it is so easy with how physical and how intense you have to be for a couple of the personalities to control and just really play selfish. But not so, and that's not what we're seeing from Arizona State at this point in the year. We're seeing a team that is really, I would say, chemistry-wise, farther along than they were at this point last year. And I think a huge part of that is the leadership that they have, and that stems to the Leadership Council. Lyrik Rawls, Cyrus Viaseu, CJ Fight, Montana Warren, they've done a great job of getting their guys in a really good headspace heading into practices before week 1 of the season.
Yeah, and it's I think it's also really telling. I mean, you talk about functionally the leadership on the defensive line with CJ Fight. You talk about Lyrik Rawls. You talk about Montana Warren, Cyrus Viaseu. You pretty much have every position group accounted for on the Leadership Council on the defensive side. And we even have some guys that have been notably very vocal and significant leaders on the team, even if they're not part of that Leadership Council. I mean, Owen Long has been extremely vocal from what I've been reading. He has been kind of a secondary leader, or maybe even the primary leader of that linebacker core. And so we're seeing that evolve. And it's not just, hey guys, let's have context in what's happening, but you have those outspoken I don't know if we can call CJ Fight outspoken, but aura-filled leaders on the defense and across every level. So it really, again, it doesn't surprise me with how well they've been doing. And this is going to matter, right? We need to make sure we have those guys that are able to go when things go wrong at A&M, and you got 110,000 screaming fans to be able to go reset your squad and go back out and do the next time, which is something that I'm not totally sure we have on the offensive side of the ball. Like, yeah, you have Kyson Brown, who has been kind of underwhelming this spring, or this fall, excuse me. And you got Khamari Anderson, who has not been able to be there all that much because of his recovery time. I mean, Parker, part of this might just be that the quarterback hasn't been finalized, so you don't have that natural leadership position just yet. But again, in the context of what we talked about in the last segment about the offense responding, I'm really hoping we start to see these guys step up in the same way that the Jalen Klemm did yesterday.
And really, that's there are a lot of questions that are going to happen. There are a lot of questions that are going to pop up. But overall, I think every single side of the ball is starting to figure out their identity and is starting to really shape up. And a lot of our questions are starting to get answered, Phil, and a big part of that stems to the leadership. I know one of our bigger questions was the running back room and how would it settle itself. It's still a little murky, but we are hearing that it's going to be a running back by committee approach, and that's really what we're starting to see. And wonder how that impacts Kyson Brown, because right now I'm not seeing a major impact on how it's impacting him as a person. He seems like he has really just been a leader, that he has really kept his offense in good shape, and we'll see how it continues to affect the offense, for lack of a better term. But overall, you can still expect a massive impact from Brown, regardless of how big of a toll that he has in the offensive workload.
See, I think it has impacted his production over the course of this fall. And that's kind of something that Hode was saying the other day, is that, like, Kyson Brown won his battle to be our starting everyone. Then he got hurt last year. But he hasn't really, in the history of the program, had to fight against so much talent to go try to secure himself the top one. And some people, when there's adversity, they rise to it. And they turn into the best possible versions of themselves as people, as players. And some people shrink. They fall down a little bit in the case of that. And I really hope that, I'm just sitting here, again, we're looking at this from 1,000 feet. I don't know what's happening in the locker room. I can talk about what I see people talk about from interviews, whether, first person or someone's talking about what someone said. But I really hope that that's not the case, that this is Kyson Brown. Just, maybe the offensive line not coming together, the tight ends not blocking some of the gaps as well as we would like to. And as that all gets figured out, we're going to start to see him be much more effective. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, man. This competition, again, we're just not seeing all that much. But what I will tell you is that there's no practice today, which means our episode tomorrow doesn't have practice to talk about. So we're going to take the opportunity to get caught up on a lot of recruiting stuff that's been happening. A lot of official visits have been announced. All of it. We're in the running for some pretty hot guys, both sides of the ball, that are going to be announcing their official visits, their unofficial visits, all that. So we're going to break that down, and I'll give you a couple names that you should be paying attention to. But for today, we are done. Of course, if you're on YouTube, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On College Network. If you are on Apple or Amazon or Spotify, make sure your second listen is Locked On Big 12. And if you've gotten already this far, make sure you've subscribed to the channel, like the video, ring the notification bell, do all those things. And Parker and I will see you tomorrow.